Good evening, everybody. Yeah. Sorry if I call attention in. So welcome everyone to Finance and Resources Oversight and Scrutiny Committee. It's worth saying in advance that we have an agenda tonight where I may not be able to deliver on my precedent of being able to wrap these meetings up in a fast, effective order, but we have several quite important items on the agenda tonight. So I will be trying to chair the meeting to make sure that we are moving conversations forward. So I do want to try to make sure that we're not repeating points that have either been made earlier in the meeting or in previous meetings beforehand. So if people could bear that in mind when they are making, when they are asking questions, making representations. So with that, I open the meeting and so our first item on our slightly changed agenda order is the minutes of the last meeting. Do I have confirmation that those are accurate and I can approve them?
Agreed.
Thank you. Next is apologies. We have none. And the third item is declarations of interest. Now, I would ask that all councillors that have an interest on their in regards to agenda item 9, town and parish grants, to please formally declare their interests at this point. So I will kick off that even though I'm not formally on the Berkhamsted Town Council anymore, I am still close enough to it that I believe I am slightly affected, shall I say.
No, nothing to declare.
I'm a town councillor at Berkhamsted as well.
I'm basically just going around anti-clockwise at this point.
I'm a town councillor at Trim Town Council.
Fiona.
Oh, sorry. No. Chair of North Church Parish Council.
Okay. Thank you. And if anybody has any other interests to declare in regards to any other agenda items. No. Okay. So consideration of any call-ins, there are none. The action points of previous meetings, there are none. And then we move on to the work programme. So hopefully people will have seen that. I had no correspondence of asking for additional items on the programme at this point. So assuming no sides, we will now move on to our first presentation and discussion, which is on local government reorganisation.
Thank you, Chair. I'll certainly kick this off or lead us into the conversation. So we'll be assuming that members have had a chance to look through this paper. As you'll all be aware, we've been working for some time with colleagues and councils across Hertfordshire on developing and responding to the government's wishes for local government reorganisation in Hertfordshire and indeed across the country. The paper sets out the progress that has been made to date. Obviously, we are reaching a critical stage with the submission due at the end of the month. The government and obviously a full council meeting next week, and the publication and circulation of the report due tomorrow, where you will have an opportunity to consider it in detail. Key points from the paper, which I think are just worth drawing out, and apologies if you are all au fait with this already. There will be within the report 3 options, 3 potential proposals for a different make-up of local government within Hertfordshire. That is a 2 unitary model, a 3 unitary model, and a for a 4 unitary model. The annex to the report sets out what those look like in detail. I don't propose to go into that in any real detail. Equally, each, as you would expect, there are pros and cons, depending on your viewpoints, for those models. As part of the development of those models, there has been a cross Hertfordshire coordinated engagement programme with 2 phases. First phase was through engaging with key stakeholders, key strategic partners. The second phase was widened out and included significant public engagement, and that is informed and will be evidenced within the report that you will soon see. I think that was all I was going to touch on for now. We've got a number of people in the room on an officer level who've been involved in development of it, and very happy from an officer point of view to take any questions.
Thank you. So we'll kick off with Councillor Gale.
Thank you. Thanks very much for the report. Just a few questions about, first of all, the option B, the 3 unitary authorities. I noticed that in that option, Decorum and St Albans are not going to be, would not be part of the same unitary authority, which would mean with current boundaries, Hemel Hempstead will straddle 2 unitary authorities. And I noticed that there's a boundary change proposed. It was part of this model with Bushy. Why isn't there a boundary change proposed in our area on this model in order to ensure that Hemel Hempstead remains part of the same unitary authority? So that's my first question, and I've got some more questions which are only tangentially related, so perhaps we could deal with that one first. Sorry, yes. Once Hemel Garden Community is built, that's not clear. Hemel Garden Community is much of that is going to be in what is currently St Albans. I hope that everybody's aware of that, but yes. So under this proposal, it looks like much of that will not be in the same unitary authority.
So, Sally, do you want to? I don't know if you want to.
I'm very happy to let you speak to that.
Okay.
I'm happy to come in at the end.
Okay, fine.
The actions that I've taken, but I think.
Yeah. I guess first principles, the linkages between boundary changes and the proposals are, at the first principle, the government has said that actually they want the proposals to be based on current district and borough boundaries. So while they are included within the submissions, there will be references to potential boundary changes as well. The fundamental initial point from government is that they want the initial proposals to be based around the current district boundaries. Now you will see in the submission that there are references to some boundary changes, which are kind of, I suppose, will be contingent on those proposals. And it may well be that there could be further, I guess, boundary changes at some point in the future, which, in order to make individual proposals most effective as time goes on. The reasoning why, at its most simple, I suppose, the reason why there are no boundary changes proposed within that particular option is because the collective group of leaders were comfortable that these were the right proposals to take forward. I'm not sure I have a huge amount to add on.
Forgive me, with option 3, as I understand it, there is a boundary change proposed within that proposal. The West is Bushy, North Bushy, South County electoral divisions included in west and excluded from central. So is that not boundary change that's proposed as part of the proposal?
It is. It's part of the, what you have to do is make a request to the Secretary of State to make a modification. And that particular change was promoted.
Yes.
I think the St Albans change that you talked about wasn't promoted by anybody as a change that they wanted to put forward.
Yes, well, that's my question. Why not? I mean, if that's not been proposed already, why is that?
So, what we were advised through the Hearts Leaders Group, and also I think it's really worth mentioning, I don't think, Aidan, that you mentioned that we've had a cross-party member working group that's been working on this throughout. So just to make sure that everybody has been kept advised, and this isn't, along as it's developed, the information has been shared with the group leaders and the members of this cross-party working group. So, what you're seeing here is the culmination of about a year's worth of work. In terms of the boundary changes, what we were advised is that we could make a boundary change that had to be based on an existing ward, and there is no existing ward that would take in the bit of the Hemel Garden community that we would ideally want to be in Hemel Hempstead. So the compromise that we've made, and this is what I've asked to be included in the spine document. The spine document is the shared document that all 11, that's the 10 districts and councils and the county council, have all signed up to, is to ask that if the option for 3 unitaries is adopted, that a boundary change is brought forward to be included, so that the Hemel Garden community is included in what would then be the West Hertfordshire unitary. But of course, there are no guarantees of that, because it actually be the successor authority that has that power, not us. So the existing authorities cannot bind the successor authority. But the reason that we couldn't bring it forward at this stage and put it in, include it, is because the district boundary, the ward boundary in St Albans is huge, it's a very large rural ward. So that's why we couldn't include it. But I think there's another piece which I think is probably best explained by Mark Brooks, about the changes that have come forward kind of very late in the day, about council's advice, about the fact that the way that the 3 and the 4 have been brought forward, whereas we've been working on the assumption that this is an agreed map, agreed changes. Actually, at quite late notice, we've been advised by council that our initial submission has to be based on existing district councils, and therefore has to be separated out, this second request, to make the modifications that are shown in the report.
Yeah, I mean, you neatly summarised this. Council has advised, and to be fair, it's been on the table for a while, that the way you need to present your proposal is based on existing district boundaries, and then you have to explain why the changes are preferred and a better alternative to be put forward, and that's the way you need to structure the document.
So, and I think I understand the distinction being that Bushy North, Bushy South are already discrete, although albeit smaller units, not really analogous to, say, Verulam ward in the St Albans district within district council. So it wouldn't have been possible to, Hemel Garden Communities doesn't quite, because it's not built yet, so it doesn't quite sit with that. But of course in the future it will, but there's no guarantee under the 3 division that Hemel will be all in one unitary authority. Can I move on to just some other questions?
Sure, I haven't seen any other hands up, so you can move to your next one.
Could you just the reports that we've got gives a very good overview of what the proposals are going to be, but I wondered if you might be able to give us a bit of information on what are the risks with each one. I mean, for example, splitting up the county into four units, what kind of returns are likely to be? What's the cost saving on that? Is that something that's going to cost more? And what's the return? You know, how long is that going to take to pay for itself? And the other thing about risk of disaggregation, you've got Hertfordshire at the moment, services provided county-wide, health and education, things like that, which provided, you know, comparatively in the country, they're quite strong. Splitting them up into groups, what are the risks of the smaller? Are there any upsides or downsides to splitting them up into small groups? I wonder if maybe you can help with some of those questions.
So I think I'll pass over to Nigel to kick us off.
So in terms of risks, you've alluded to the greatest risk, which is the disaggregation of county council services into 2, 3 or 4. It's a risk to disaggregate social care, but is part of what the LGR process is asking authorities to do, to set up unitary authorities that will deliver all those services. If you split it into 2, it's a risk. If you split it into 3, there's more splitting, so probably a slightly higher risk, and 4, equally a slightly higher risk. Equally, you're going to have to resource those, and a lot of the statutory functions that need to be split, which is where the main risk is, so social care, be it children's or adults, education. When you're splitting those down, there is a risk, but there's also statutory roles that each authority will have to fulfil. So when you go from 2 to 3 to 4, you've still got those statutory roles. So again, there's a risk around being able to resource many authorities where those services are being delivered by one at the moment. So an easy example is you have one director of adult social care. It's a statutory role. You will need potentially 2, 3 or 4 if you split them up, dependent on how the models look. In terms of the costs of that, the publication that comes out tomorrow goes on the best estimates guide that have been worked on by all the CFOs collectively over the last few months, and you'll get a full breakdown of the cost, disaggregation costs, estimated disaggregation costs, the benefits, because there are benefits as well to unitaries in terms of creating efficiencies from merging 10 districts into 2, 3 or 4 different unitary makeups. So from that perspective, you'll see all that in the report that comes out tomorrow. There's not a huge amount of detail I could go through now. 1, because a lot of that information is bargained, and 2, it's 90 pages. So it'd take a long time to try and disseminate that information now.
But it's right, isn't it, that in purely financially, in terms of cost savings, splitting it into 2 gives more cost savings, and splitting and 3 and 4, it's that way
Basic
around.
Economics around economies of scale. So if you have a bigger entity, it can often do things that are cheaper per unit cost. There are, as you will see in the submissions and the options that are being published tomorrow, there are other impacts. You know, that ability to react to your community if you are a smaller entity, and potentially the efficiencies and the benefits gained from that. And again, the proposals will argue what the benefits, the pros and cons for 2, 3 and 4 are, both financial and non-financial.
And I see with the proposal to split into 2 larger units, there are obviously larger numbers of people within each unit, creating perhaps a less of a local identity in each one. Are there any ways of mitigating that? What are the ways is there flexibility within, for example, devolving services?
A lot of those organisations that have gone through government restructuring before us have set up things like community groups, regional sub-hubs, to try and make sure that when they are a bigger entity, you know, the likes of North Yorkshire have done this, Cumbria, they've set up more regional subgroups that feed in so that they can get over that potential obstacle of people feeling on the periphery or not involved in that process. And again, the 2, 3 and 4 models have different ways of approaching that.
I think it's right to say as well, there'll be a push for more area-based governance. So you'll have committees focused on particular areas with local communities involved, parish councils, for example, and other bodies as part of that sort of decision-making process. So there'll be different ways that they'll look to bring in that local decision-making.
And what is the extent of evidence that having a larger number of people is in a unit is disadvantageous?
So there are many reports out there reporting that bigger is better, smaller is better, both financially and policy-wise. Very few authorities have actually gone through LGR, and those that have done in recent years. So it's very hard to get an evidence base as to what has worked effectively or not. Equally, when you look at current benchmarking data for authorities with different population sizes and different geographical boundaries, it's very much varied in terms of those reports. Depending on which organisation's reporting you want to take on, there are very different views in that. And equally, there are very differing views across Hertfordshire, hence why we've got 3 options that have been put forward.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Chair.
I'm just going to cheekily jump in because my general question follows on very much from that since Nigel's talking. So apologies, I do have Councillor Capozzi waiting. Sorry, I'm going to put you on the spot on this one. Whilst when we're looking at the options compared to one another, it's I can certainly infer the financial comparisons are quite easy to look at what one model would do versus another. But when we have some objective KPIs in there, for example, payback periods, I'm guessing that there must be sort of quite a number of authorities getting together to try to look at that. So with your sort of Section 151 hat on, how confident are you in the financial models that have been used? You know, if we're basically looking at trying to compare them via payback periods in particular, do you, if you were going to give me a percentage number of how confident you would be of those being materially correct, would you be able to give me a steer?
I wouldn't be able to go as far as that. The period of time that we've had to work on this, which is relatively short, the limited evidence base I've just mentioned in terms of other authorities to use as an evidence for those projections is not there. What I would say is the CFOs have collectively, all 11 have collectively signed off the financial model that has been built and signed off on the assumptions. There are 2 pages in the finance section that lists the caveats and the issues. What I would say is, because we have been very consistent in our assumptions, the hope across the CFOs is that if any of those assumptions are wrong, they are equally wrong for 2, 3, 4. So at this point in time, when you're looking at it, if the model is totally wrong, it'll be wrong for all 3, and hopefully in the same amount. So if one of them is coming out strongest, when you did a revised model in 6 months, 12 months, hopefully it would still do that. The one big caveat to the finance model is the fair funding review. We spent a lot of time trying to change funding mechanisms for all the different options, the different unitaries that will be set up in line with FFR. But as members will be aware, we haven't had government sign-off on FFR, and about 4 weeks ago, the lead minister stood up and said there are going to be significant changes. So we had to row back on all that because we were basically playing with numbers that we've been told were wrong. So there is potentially significant changes, but I would like to think that they would be proportionately different in each of the models. So they give you a fair reflection of what the expectation is across the finance community of Hertfordshire in terms of the models as they stand at the moment, based on those setups. There's a huge amount of caveats. Part of that is we don't know how these authorities are going to run. You know, one very simple example is IT. So you could run one IT system across 2, 3 or 4 authorities with like a shared service, one operation. You could have 4 distinct IT setups run very differently, more agile, more dynamic, potentially smaller, maybe more efficient, maybe less efficient. We don't know that. So there's so many questions around how the services and how those decisions will make those decisions, but those organisations will make decisions in the future that, yes, there are a lot of caveats and assumptions built in there.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. I wasn't quite sure if I asked the question well, but you've certainly answered what I needed. Councillor Capozzi.
Thank you, Chair. Do you know why the guidelines is for a population of about 500,000 in a unitary? Where that number came from?
So that number came from central government.
Yeah. Why would they pick that kind of number?
I don't think I'm even going to try to speak on behalf of central government. I think it's based on a number of things around past experience, around their desire, I think, to reduce the number of overall authorities, not just merge two tiers, but make sure that actually it's not replaced by a large number of relatively small and inverted commas. There is, it appears, a level of flexibility around that number. The extent, the amount of how much flexibility there is, I think, is only going to be shown when more decisions start to roll through. We've seen the Surrey decision last week, where I think they're both above 500,000. But I mean, there's been a lot of back and forth between local authorities. No, I don't mean in Hertfordshire, I mean across the country, kind of testing and asking about that. Some people saying actually it's been taken off the table. Government or certainly officials in government have been clear that it hasn't been taken off the table, but areas are welcome to come in with proposals that don't quite meet that criteria, and they will be judged on their merits.
I think option 3 with the 4 unitaries and but well below the 500,000 each, I think goes back to the point about more local, more closer to your residents, etc., and what you're running. Because when you look at option 1 with the 2 unitaries and you look at geographically the different sizes for pretty much the same number of people, and then you've got the east area that potentially is more rural, and then you've got a different maybe demographic and also financial wealth of that area. Is not, it may be evenly split in terms of people, but there's lots of impact in terms of what that unitary may or may not be able to charge. You know, I'm assuming that each gets to set their own sort of like council taxes or whatever that might be called in the future as well. So it's geographically and population is one thing, but who is in those areas? I mean, we might all move from west to east if it's cheaper to live in the east, if they've got better rates, or they might want to come and live in the west if we're cheaper because we've got, I don't know, more money. It's splitting the county into quite one much far more dense area and one much less dense area, which has got to have an impact on how the unitary is run in the future if it's that large.
Okay, I'm not really sure there's a response needed on that one. No. Okay, we will move through to Councillor Stevens.
In fact, picking up on your question there, on your points there, I think my question comes down to the nitty-gritty. In the way you have defined these various options, does it look as if each of the unitaries are equally strong and viable? And if we've got a situation where one is weaker than the others, given the fair funding review issues that we've got and are likely to have well into the future, is there a likelihood that the unitaries will find themselves having to cross-subsidise in that area if there's a weaker one in that sector? Over to you.
The Nigel question.
So in terms of the financial viability, that is part of the publication that will go out tomorrow. The reason I'm being very cautious is because there's a Hertfordshire-wide embargo until tomorrow, so that everybody publishes at the same time. And I personally don't want to find myself in a newspaper tomorrow morning saying something about Hertfordshire. So you will find out about the viability of the 2, 3 and 4 and in those options, how each unitary will have what their financial projections are in the 5-10 year period. And again, I believe members outside of this forum are being briefed. Some of you have been briefed, some are being briefed next week on some of those details as well. So you get a lot more detail from that perspective. In terms of authorities cross-subsidising each other, I'm not aware historically of authorities agreeing to subsidise each other. And there is a clear issue around taxpayers' money being used by one authority to fund another authority, because that's not what the council taxpayers pay for. So there'd have to be a lot of discussions around something like that before anything like that kind of policy was arranged. And that'd be very much a MHCLG or Treasury led move.
Thank you.
Councillor Greenfield.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure this is the right part of the agenda to ask this question, so apologies if not. In terms of transition from now to whatever unitaries come into effect, at what point will this council not be able to spend its money? Because clearly the government doesn't want councils to blow every penny before unitaries start.
So,
I don't know if there is an answer.
so let me go with a financial, and then Mark can come out and contradict me slightly. So, in theory, all the way up to April 2028, which is the present vesting day for the new authorities, Dacorum Borough Council will have a duty to its citizens, its residents, its businesses to continue as a going concern. That will mean delivering services, making sure that we're doing what our statutory requirements are. The issue is that once the shadow authorities are set up, there's something that will come in which is called a structural changes order, which will mean before we can make significant financial investments, and I think it's £100,000 on contract, and I can't remember what it is on capital now. £1 million on capital. I'm going to stick with the ones. We would have to get authority from the shadow authority to approve that. Historically, that hasn't caused, with those very few that have gone through it, any significant issues or concerns because we would be duty bound to residents. The way it may have an impact is where there is large amounts of significant investment that maybe doesn't align with the future shadow authorities' aims and aspirations. And that's something that we're very much aware of in terms of how we're planning our current financial plans and our current strategies.
And just to follow up on that, picking up from Councillor Gale's early point about Hemel Garden communities, which I'm guessing is not going to be built by the time the unitaries happen. If a financial commitment has already been made to that, is there any obligation for the unitary to continue that, or are all bets off? I mean, I guess there's the handover period, but at the point it changes, it could all...
So post LGR, the authorities are standalone sovereign authorities. They can make their own decisions. They will have contractual obligations that will transfer from the old entities to the new entities. So for instance, if we had a contract for our waste delivery and it was for 10 years, it would transfer over. It'd be up to them how they dealt with that contract. You know, there's a lot of contract novation, contract cessation, payments, etc. But they would be, like we are, a sovereign entity, just a larger sovereign entity.
Okay, further go. Councillor
Are we summing up? Because I just want to say a couple of things. I just wanted to be clear, I guess, partly in response to Michaela's point, Councillor Pose's point about the 500,000. The process that we're going through is something we've been asked to go through by the government. This isn't something that any of the leaders in Hertfordshire have chosen, or any of the councils. So it's a process that we go through, and the 500,000 is just part of a set of rules that we've been given, a set of criteria that we're meant to be working to. Obviously, a lot more of them are listed in that document. You know, we're doing the best we can. This isn't something that I think that any council would actually choose to go through. We have to believe that ultimately it will result in better services for our residents, and that is the kind of one of the key objectives. But as I said, there is no perfect answer, and the model for 3 in some ways does offer a sort of almost a Goldilocks scenario, except for the fact that we're about to build 11,000 homes around Hemel Hempstead, and it's very important for Dacorum that those homes are focused on Hemel and serve Hemel. And at the moment, there are no guarantees as to how that plays out. But just to say that I have asked, and it is included in the documents to government, that significant consideration is given were the government to choose. And please, I think the one thing that actually hasn't been said and made absolutely clear today is that this ultimately is a decision for the Secretary of State. So each council is asked to put forward their preference, but ultimately the decision will be taken by the Secretary of State. I think it's important that any submission to the Secretary of State makes clear that from Dacorum's point of view and the residents of Hemel and the rest of Dacorum, that the Hemel Garden community would be included in any local authority that moved forward from here. So I just want to pick up on one other thing. I think, Nigel, you said about the structural change order that or one of you said that it would then be down to the successor authority. I think until that successor authority is up and running, it's actually down to, referred to the Secretary of State. I think the structural change order will come in before the successor authority is elected.
Thank you. And since nobody's come in to jump through after we've had a sum up, we will close agenda item 7. I don't think we're formally noting the report, are we? But there's no feedback. But we will be eagerly awaiting the additional facts tomorrow. So with that, we are now going.
There is a recommendation. Yeah.
Chairman, could I, with your agreement, could I just make one comment? Sally has used the word asked twice, and in defence of Sally, we weren't asked, we were told. And I think that does make a significant difference to the attitude around the table.
Thank you. Okay, so we are now moving.
Sorry, Chair, there is a recommendation. The recommendation is to approve the process that we're going through. I just think it's...
Yeah, it's to note the process and the future decision making.
Yeah. Okay, so it is a note rather than an approve though. Okay, so we'll agree that is noted. Thank you. Okay, so we will now circle onto our next agenda item, which is public participation. And on this note, I would like to acknowledge and welcome Paul Kelly, who's has a statement and some questions for the officers. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to dwell on, but thank you all very, very much for coming here and spending your Guy Fawkes evening here rather than being with your family. I'll be very, very brief. We've had a lot of discussion on this in the full council already, and you've already actually voted on it. But there's a theme carrying on from the previous discussion about funding and allocation of funding. And the parishes, to a certain extent the towns, although they're not, I'm speaking predominantly on terms of the parishes here, are very, very aggrieved at the proposed removal of the funding, and particularly consider it to be double taxation. And that is where the question really came from here. And it was that we believe we are being forced to make these changes. We're effectively being forced to put our precepts up. And our question is very, very simple, is the legality of that. And I'm sure we'll be going over to Mark to give a response to it. But I just wanted to make the point that how angry the parishes are, and I hope that came across in the full council meeting at the last one, that we think it's very, very unfair that this funding is being taken away from us. So the question formally was, or two, should the grant cuts really be considered an indirect council tax rise, and consequently, does that have an impact on the increasing tax over the 5% threshold from the court?
If you want me to jump in there first, a very simple answer would be no. Because in terms of the proposal is to reduce a grant that the council awards to town and parishes to the tune of £66,000 reduction for 26-27. And at no point are we asking anybody to increase anything in relation to council tax as a result of this cut. In fact, you could argue that we're making this cut to prevent the council from having to increase council tax above and beyond the threshold that is set for decorum. This is part of balancing the books, so to speak. So from that perspective, it's the opposite, if anything, in terms of cutting council tax. In terms of the second part of your question, are the grant cuts legal? Yes, and Mark may follow up on this. Hopefully he supports me. We're reviewing the grants that we award to everybody, not just town and parish councils. We're making sure that the taxpayer is getting good value for money from the money that they give to decorum. And as part of that, there is now a proposal to make what is a small cut compared to what was proposed 12 months ago and also a few months ago, prior to engagement to town and parish council grants, which is something which the council is fully within its rights to do so in terms of how it funds other bodies.
Yeah, I mean, you summarise that well, but essentially, as Nigel says, this is a discretionary grant which the council pays, and I believe we're currently the only council in Hertfordshire who pays it as well. So in pure terms, it is lawful for the council to produce that grant, and setting the precept is obviously a decision for the parish council itself.
Okay, I thought that might be your answer. If you could put that in writing, I'll be very grateful. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much for your time. I hope I didn't take too much time. I didn't want a repeat of the full council debate. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Paul. So with that, we will
Sorry,
now...
Can I just make a point, just a point of clarification? I know you've said that we've already voted on it. We haven't already voted on it. We voted on a motion that asked us to preempt this report coming to scrutiny. That's the motion. We haven't voted. We haven't voted on what's to be decided. And at the point that was voted on, this proposal was not in the public domain, nor were the results of the consultation that we had put out. And the due process of the council need to be seen through before they're preempted by a motion to council. That's what we voted on.
Yeah. Okay. And just to clarify, I mean, we exchanged correspondence on that, but it is a cabinet decision, one for the cabinet to take, which will be done in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, I understand. Thank you very much for clarifying that.
So that even makes a nice little introduction to the next item, which is the officer proposal document on town and parish grants for us to scrutinise before it goes to cabinet for decision. Nigel, I'm expecting you are.
I will give a very brief introduction. I think as the public participant, I said there's been a lot of conversation in regards to this. First of all, I would clarify, it's not an officer recommendation in terms of policy. It is an administration recommendation at this point in time, which we're seeking scrutiny on. From that perspective, officers provide options, members drive policy.
Noted. Sorry, I misspoke.
In terms of the recommendation in the report, I'm hope the group will realise that following lots of consultation starting in the September of 2024 and running through to the summer of 2025, the administration has taken lots of response from town and parish councils and made significant changes to proposals that were made at the start of the summer in terms of town and parish council grants. What the proposal now is to reduce the parish warden grant over the next 2 years. So initially a £66,000 cut to the town and parish council warden grant for 26-27. Which on average equates to about 4% of the overall funding that town and parish councils receive. Subsequently to that, the recommendation is to continue with the ongoing review of concurrent services and what it's delivering at present for residents and businesses, and to work with town and parish councils to look at how that can be delivered most efficiently and effectively going forward, again driving best value for the taxpayer. And then thirdly, a confirmation that we will continue a grant that we pay at the moment for closed cemeteries, but instead of wrapping it up in those, it will be a specific bespoke grant which will increase annually by RPI to make sure that we're meeting our statutory requirements to ensure that those closed cemeteries are being maintained. The rest of the report, I'm assuming the committee has read, but yes, open for questions. I can take any technical questions, any policy-related questions. The portfolio holder is very much open.
Okay, thank you. So I will open the floor to questions. Now, I believe that Councillor Duris has...
No, I'll hold my fire.
You would like to hold your fire, okay. Councillor Santa Maria.
Thank you, Chair. I've got quite a few questions. Until I read this report, I was relatively uninformed on how town councils operate, so I've learned a lot. Firstly, I think on the side of we need to save money and things could be done more efficiently, I did feel like there's not really enough information that's been provided by the parish councils to see where the money's going. So things like £2,000 on notice boards. Some of the councils don't have any notice boards. Others have 10. Others are spending £50 maintaining them. Others have 5 and are spending £500 maintaining them. I've got my notes in a funny order. And then additionally, in terms of whether this will, no, sorry, I'll come on to that. What happens with and additionally, what happens with the precept funding? Because everything that was listed in the responses seemed to be, saying, well, this is things that we fund from these grants. So I didn't really gather what wasn't being funded by the grants. On the other hand, with the creating the new fund, and additionally, with Clean, Safe and Green covering some of the maintenance and things, is this actually going to save us any money? Because it seems like more or less the same money is just going to be used elsewhere. And I do have concerns about things like the public toilets and whether Clean, Safe and Green will maintain areas in as good a way as the parish councils do now, because there's certainly areas of Hemel which are not really kept up to the standard we'd expect. And then additionally, if on page 64 it says that only limited savings were possible from an in-depth review, so how do we know that things aren't being done as efficiently as possible? And also, will the sports facilities and open spaces, will they not come under the wellbeing strategy? There's quite a few questions there. It's more sort of me going, this doesn't all seem to add up at the moment. And I'm very happy to hear from anyone on why I'm wrong about that and why it does add up.
If I can just give a few thoughts, I'm not sure if William has a few thoughts as well. We do need more information from town and parish councils as to what the grant is funding, which is part of the reason why the administration has made a decision with the concurrent services grant to not make cuts for 26-27 and to carry on that ongoing engagement, because the last thing that we want to see are services that residents and businesses want fall away for one reason or another. In terms of what town and parish councils do and how they fund it, they are standalone entities. How they spend their funds is up to them. What we're trying to decipher is spending the grant on and whether that meets the original aspirations of the grant. Originally, when these grants were set up, particularly concurrent services grant, was for town and parish councils to deliver services in more rural areas that Decorum at that time, a very long time ago, was unable to deliver. Whereas now, Decorum, we're in a much different place to deliver across the whole borough. And so we're now looking at those services and making sure that the services that we deliver in unparished areas are delivered in parished areas to the same level and the same standard. And the view at the moment is there is very much a difference in what's being delivered. And equally, that clarity around what's being delivered from the grant and the precept is still a little bit cloudy to a certain extent. What each parish delivers is very different. Parishes are there to use their precept to deliver over and above what Decorum needs to deliver from a statutory services perspective. And so they are fully within their right to charge more precept, to deliver more services that residents value and want. And that absolutely needs to stay true going forward, which is why, again, we need to review how they're using this grant before we make any permanent changes going forward and make sure that it is in line with equity for the rest of the borough, so that we are funding, from a Decorum perspective, the same service across the whole borough, and we're not financing a different service for different people. All about that equity aspect.
Thank you. That looks like that's answered the question, so we'll move on to Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Chairman. Although not currently a parish councillor, in the early 2000s I was on National Hills Parish Council, so I saw how the concurrent services scheme and the parish warden scheme worked. So my questions are really relating to the corporate priorities. So how does reviewing replacing the concurrent services grant with contractual arrangements, how does that basically fit in with the priority of community engagement, with engaging with residents and partners to have a real say on services? And how does getting rid of the parish wardens fit in with the corporate priority of putting residents at the heart of everything that the council does and providing a clean, safe and green focused environments.
So Nigel, I think you've probably got one comment to make on the second question, then we'll pass it over to William.
Yeah, so we're not looking to get rid of wardens. What we're doing is we're reducing the grant that we provide to town and parish councils for wardens. The majority of town and parish councils do not have a substantial warden. I think there is one full-time warden now across all the town and parish councils, with several, including Nash Mills, having no warden at all. So from that perspective, it's a case of they don't have wardens, so that reduction potentially won't have a huge impact in the number of wardens we have across the borough. But that is a decision for town and parish councils. What those wardens do, if they believe it's delivering over and above what the quorum should and they want to continue to fund that, they could choose to fund those posts going forward. It's not about getting rid of the wardens, it's about making sure that we're being equitable and efficient with the council taxpayers' money of decorum and making sure we know what we're getting for that money. Which again, coming back to corporate priorities, it's about making every penny count.
Thanks. William, Sally, do you want to comment on corporate priorities?
Well, I suppose the first thing to say is, it's important that we're accountable in how we spend taxpayers' money. And that is, very much part of this, this review. And to the point of Councillor Santa Maria, one of the key underpinning elements of this is consistency, having a fair and consistent approach to the delivery of services. As your question implied, there's a lot of uncertainty. It's very unclear what is being paid for, what is being purchased. The other dimension to it is about efficiencies. So in the last however many years, Clean, Safe and Green have had to reduce their level of service in a number of ways, how often they mow places, for example. And that hasn't been reflected in practice under this concurrent services grant. A lot of council services are now having to cover their costs, community centres, playing fields and so on. They are being required to cover their costs, and so concurrent services need to come on that same journey with us. The other principle that applies here is this one of equivalence that was discussed in the council chamber at great length a week or so ago. In the same way that it is important that decorum, or it has been important that decorum make sure that they deliver a quality of service across parished areas that is delivered in unparished areas, it is also only fair and reasonable that this level of service that is in parished areas is equivalent to that in unparished areas. And if parishes want to enhance that level of service, have more mows, have a warden, then that is within their power to do so. So, the principles that are at play here are accountability, consistency, and fairness.
Councillor Capozzi.
Thank you. A number of points from the report itself. Page 63, on the executive summary, towards the bottom, it says, the majority of services supported by the Warden Services grants are not services that Decorum Council delivers across the borough in unparished areas. So it then goes on to say that a breakdown of the concurrent services are notice boards, public halls, playgrounds and sports pavilions maintenance, other grounds maintenance and open facilities. Are you saying that in unparished areas you don't have any of those activities?
In unparished areas, we don't finance notice boards. Public halls that we own are out on peppercorn rent, so it's full repair and maintenance leases, so it's zero to the council. Playgrounds and sport pavilions, it depends on ownership and operation. Some are operated by the council, and some of them, such as adventure playgrounds, do return an income as well. So from that perspective, it's a mixture of the service. In terms of what we've brought down, that's the mixture of what town and parish council said they use these grants to finance. Going forward, there are some of those services, as we've alluded to, that Decorum would absolutely want to continue, and particularly maintenance of the assets and overall offices. And that's what we're going to review during 26-27, how that's delivered going forward. From that perspective, it might be something where we deliver it through CSG. It might be something where we commission the town and parish council to do so. It may also be something where we advise that we don't think it meets our objectives. So there are areas where town and parish councils are leasing land or assets and then paying for the upkeep of those land or assets for somebody else, which is not something that the Decorum would support. We would support the maintenance of our own community assets, but not those of a third party.
Okay. There's a sentence here that says, well, I'm not quite sure, it doesn't actually make sense because it's almost like it starts like it wants to go on, then there's a full stop, but it says, moreover, as there is no relationship between the sum paid and any specific outcomes or performance, full stop. Has there ever been a request of parish or town councils to provide outcomes or performance based on any grant they've received?
No, there's been very limited feedback from town and parish councils and very limited requests to town and parish councils on how these funds have been spent. There was a review that took place in 2016-17, and then up to September time, August, September 2024, there's been very limited review in terms of what these funds are utilised for.
Can I ask how you've come up with a value of £50,000 to deliver some of the services if you were to do a commissioned or contracted status with specific outcomes, and how you've worked out that that's a saving of around 66,000?
In terms of going forward, the proposal is that we look at concurrent services. We think from what we've had back from town and parish councils, and I reiterate what I said to Councillor Santa Maria, we got very patchy information back, which is why the decision hasn't been made to go to that level of cuts. But from what was fed back, what was considered a statutory service or a service that Decorum currently delivers to unparished areas, there was around about £50,000 of services. That review is undertaken by the lead for CSG, Ian Ross, in some of the grounds maintenance and open space areas, but there is further work that's required to get to an understanding of what that cost would be and what those services would look like.
And isn't there a possibility that keeping it with the towns and parishes where they're delivering might even be, will the parish get an opportunity to tender to carry on doing that work?
Absolutely. I think we put in the report that we will contract out some work to town and parish councils. So it will change. Instead of giving them a grant, which we've given at the moment, with no service level agreement, going forward, we might say, if you're going to carry on maintaining that green area there, it's more efficient for you to do it, so we will pay you to do that going forward, and that's what that review that we're going to do during 26-27 will undertake. So from that perspective, from a Decorum perspective, we know what we're getting from town and parish council, value for money. The town and parish council knows what it's supposed to be delivering for the funding that it's receiving. It's a much clearer contractual basis.
And that relationship.
Councillor Allen just wanted to come in on the point now.
Yeah, it's just, hopefully it's helpful. I think £50,000 is relating to a residue of services delivered under concurrent services grant, and the £66,000 is the 50% savings in the first year under the warden's grant. So that's why those two figures are seemingly at odds with each other. They're not. They refer to different aspects of the finances.
I actually think it's 116k of concurrent reduced down to 50, which is where the 66 comes from.
It's confusing. It's the same number for both aspects.
Well, it's a bit confusing because it flips between 115k, 116k in the same report, so it's a little bit inconsistent with the numbers in it overall. One of the things I have to challenge is this insinuation that towns, or let's stick with parishes, I'm not sure about towns, they're bigger, they've got bigger money to play with, but that there's been no request for efficiencies. Correct. At no point was there any kind of like, can you save money? But it actually says in here that in cash terms, the money has stayed the same, and yet we have been subject, or parishes have been subject to inflation as per anybody else in the country. And so therefore, indirectly, efficiencies have had to be made. We have reduced certain things that we've done, frequency of things, etc., in order to make the same cash value go further. So I agree we would never, no one has ever been asked to go and make a savings and show a percentage reduction, but it has to be acknowledged that inflation has impacted parishes as much as anybody else's budget across the Decorum.
Yeah, you're entirely right, cash flat. What I would say is the Decorum's funding has dropped by over 40%, irrelevant of inflation.
Okay, I think we need to move on to the next
Can I
question,
just
which
ask,
is...
I've got another point, sorry. There's a big paragraph about the fact that with these imbalances and inequalities and how development of open spaces in unparished areas,
let's come back to you if you get that. But, so Councillor Gale was waiting to speak.
Yes, just a couple of questions about just numbers, figures. I'm curious. What percentage of the population of Decorum are residents of unparished versus parished areas? That's the first question. Have we got that information? Roughly speaking.
Roughly half.
I think
it's more.
It's about half.
I think unparished is about 60,000.
I thought it was 57%.
It's roughly half.
Okay.
It was in a previous report. I can find that information out and send it through to you.
And just another question about the precepts. How do the precepts in Decorum compare nationally to places where they don't have such grants, or other places where they do have such grants but they're smaller? And do we know, how in general how our precepts compare with other town and parish councils?
So anecdotally, the precepts for Hertfordshire, for Decorum town and parish councils is significantly lower than national median. I'm not sure that's relevant to this discussion from my perspective, because it is up to town and parish councils to set their precept and to meet the needs of their residents and to deliver what their residents want. And that's what their precept should be based on, meeting the needs of their residents. So from my perspective and from the perspective of this grant, that's not really been taken into consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, you mentioned that 57% are probably of the population is in parished areas. Is that correct? About that? Unparished, right. What is the percentage of council tax take that the parished areas contribute to overall take?
I can come back. I don't know the percentage of overall council tax from parish off the top of my head.
This is probably a statement. I feel that this saving is minutiae. It's when you've got £1.7 million surplus on investment income. We've got, in 2 years' time, probably we're not going to be here, and then it's all going to be up for grabs. My view is we continue with the current grants. This £200,000 fund, what is the point of that? Just use that to fund the grants at present, because these parish councils stretch back 300 years. We stretch back 50. They are vital to the locality and history of our borough. So I think we should support them. And this is minutiae compared to the overall budget and what we can save.
I know that wasn't a question, but that actually leads in quite well just to get Nigel to explain the difference between the proposed 200,000 and the current concurrent services grant.
So the concurrent services grant is in the baseline and is an ongoing demand on taxpayers and cannot be financed through the use of reserves. From that perspective, we need to set a balanced budget on an ongoing basis. Irrelevant of LGR, in 2-3 years' time, I have a responsibility to Section 151 to ensure that we carry on with good fiscal stewardship and make sure that we follow the rules that are set out by MXCLG in terms of our budget setting basis. In terms of the investment fund that is being proposed and yet to be detailed in terms of how that will be utilised, that is there with an eye on LGR to help support town and parish councils in preparation for LGR and build some resilience and investment in their assets so that post LGR, when they're likely to receive significantly less funding, in my opinion, they will be in a position where they're stronger and they're more self-sufficient than if we don't make changes in the interim period prior to that change.
One last question. I I've read within this replies by the parish councils. There's one that I'm missing is, did put an end, did they reply?
There are several responses that we got from town and parish councils that have not been published. What we have published are the template that we requested for town and parish councils to complete. The reason that we have published them are not all the conversations and submissions. So the council you refer to sent an email response in, which was very useful. But they weren't published for two reasons. One, because I hadn't said I'm going to publish emails that are sent to me, and I'm not in the kind of light of publishing things that people don't know are going to get published. And secondly, I'm sure there are lots of town and parish councils out there that wouldn't want me to publish everything that they have sent to me.
Thank you. Councillor Capozzi, did you want to come back with your earlier question?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to do my questions anymore, but just one thing. I think the way this has been approached in a blanket reduction of 50% across everybody is actually quite a lazy way of doing it, because I acknowledge that different parishes operate in different ways. They have different amounts of assets, they have no assets, some have loads. The definition of what a warden is and why some have them, some doesn't have them is probably because some don't need them. So yes, there are different values of warden services and warden grants and concurrent services going out there, but a proper review and not a very user-friendly spreadsheet to fill in is not a sufficient way to gather the information of what the parishes are actually doing at They are all so individual, just like I'm sure on parish areas in Hemel Hempstead are all very individual places as well. There should be much deeper dive into this and saying 50% on that and save 66k, which at the end of the day, I mean, what is £66,000 when you're looking at these massive numbers, but it's a lot at that smaller scale down there. So I actually think that the exercise in itself was futile and has actually not informed anybody of anything of any substance. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Grenfield.
Yes, so my ward is an unparished ward, and I recognise at the start of the conversation you said you feel that raising the presets is a double tax on residents in parishes. I would counter that with my residents would say they are currently paying a double tax for residents who live in parishes, because as Nigel pointed out, a percentage or the concurrent grant can't be covered by reserves. So in theory, and it does depend on the amounts, as Councillor Elliott said, a percentage of the council tax that my non-parish residents pay goes to fund wardens potentially in parished areas. Personally, I live in a parish. I think wardens are a good thing. And when we held a public meeting in Bennett's End, that was a request from the people at Bennett's End to have a warden. So I think we're maybe getting wrapped up in some of the individual detail. I agree with the principle that Councillor Allen said, that this should be about how we spend public money fairly for our residents, so that we set a level of service. Those parish councils have the ability to provide a higher level of service if they choose and their residents support it through the precept. But for me, this is about setting an equal footing before we go into local government review and unitaries. And for me, I also think it will help protect the parish in that future step, because it will be contractual, you'll have performance indicators for how the money is being spent, and the whole borough will be considered evenly. So that wasn't really a question. Sorry.
It wasn't, but I'm indulging as well. So I'm going to jump in just with my semantic comment before we come to Councillor Juris. Oh, was that a hand? No, okay. This comes from me working in a charity and dealing with grants all the time. I think that if we are making any changes in these areas, I would strongly ask us to relabel these. These are not grants. A grant is funding given for a specific purpose, and generally with a grant you wouldn't need to ask somebody for efficiencies, because they would come back to you and tell you exactly how they were spending the money. There is a purpose to them. So these are grants in name only, because what is happening at the moment is the parishes and towns are receiving the money. There is a historic reason why they were getting it, but there's no direct side of what they are spending it on. So regardless, I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing, but if we are changing them, can we stop calling them grants? Because I think that's really what's making this a problem. Right, Councillor Duris.
Well, that's a very good segue, actually, that you've done. And I think I firstly have to remind everybody, because Nigel, right at the very beginning, made the point, which is quite correct, that this is not an officer recommendation, but a cabinet recommendation or a member recommendation. And so on that basis, well done, Nigel, because I think you performed in the nicest possible way, admirably. And possibly trying to defend a level of indefensibility. There's a paragraph on page 64, which caught my eye, and I'll just read the first couple of lines of it. And it says, as a result of the financial context summarised above, that's financial situation, the council is no longer in a financial position where it can continue to financially support town and parish councils in the way that it has done previously. It actually never has supported town and parish councils in the way it's done previously. It has actually given money to town and parish councils to allow them to undertake the work which the borough council would have done, and to be able to do it at a better rate and a cheaper rate because they are on the ground right there. In terms of what's been said in the discussion this evening, there's a couple of words that come to mind. Consistency and a mixture, but particularly consistency. And I think hearing Councillor Santa Maria and Councillor Capozzi and Councillor Greenfield, I think there's a level of inconsistency that is running through this whole report. It doesn't make, it's not a good report, to be perfectly honest, I think it's fair to say. And it's a report that has been sort of put together to achieve an end. And the end result, financially, on my figures, and you can always cut figures to say whatever you want, but my figures is that over a 2-year period, on the proposals that are being suggested at the moment, is that there will be a saving of £248,000, which is very good, minus £200,000, which is going to be given in the form of a grant. Not quite sure what for and how it's going to be distributed. So the net saving over 2 years is going to be £48,000, according to my figures. And that, is it really worth it? That's the bottom line. There's been a lot of talk about the way town and parish councils undertake the work that they do using the concurrent services money. There you are. I didn't use the G word, the money. But there is a lot of talk about that and how they use it. And also there's a discussion taking place about the consistency between the operation of DBC within parish areas and unparished areas. And to give you one example, and we're in the middle of the autumn and the leaves are falling. But if you go into Hemel in particular, there's a little machine that goes around and sweeps up the leaves. I've yet to see any level of machine or human or otherwise go around the parishes, sweeping up not the verges, but the pavements. They do have pavements where there's been leaf fall.
They don't do that in Bennett's End.
Yeah. They don't do it in Bennett's End.
Well, actually.
Well, you don't have any leaves in Bennett's End.
They haven't Berkhamsted.
Have they? Well,
And Warner's End.
Enough.
But
suffice to say,
I think we can agree that there's inconsistency.
Well, it just demonstrates the inconsistency that you, and thank you, officer. On a serious point, I do think that the survey that was undertaken was flawed. It didn't really make sense, and a number of parishes didn't complete it because they really couldn't understand what you were actually asking for. And if you look at some of the answers to some of the parishes, you almost get the feeling that they actually came up with the answer to fit the question rather than what the answer should be. And that's not the right thing. So here's I know that this is not the recommendation. There is no recommendation other than to note the report. But my suggestion, my proposal would be, bearing in mind what I've just said about the funding and savings, and bearing in mind the angst that has occurred amongst parishes about the way the consultation and the survey is conducted is not good. I would say that the relationship between parishes and DBC, and indeed that could spill over into the relationship between borough councillors representing parishes, and I should say that I represent Ashridge, which includes Little Gaddesden and Potton is also not good. So my proposal would be, if you care to think about this, is to defer this for 1 year, and also, of course, defer the 200,000 as well, so it goes. But in April and May next year, have a proper, sensible survey and conduct a relationship between towns and parish councils so that you get the right answers and there is no level of inconsistency and there's no level of ambiguity. And then, if we believe what we probably will, there will be a major change in this sort of funding in 2028. So scrap it or defer it to 26, 27, and then, if necessary, scrap it, which may sound unkind, but scrap it in 2028, 29, which is when the new unitary comes in.
Okay, so I think Nigel's already answered about the difference between the 200 versus the current 254. Does any officer want to make any comment about what Terry has called a consultation, but the questionnaires that were given to the parishes? Do we feel that there is any response to whether that was inadequate or not?
Very, very brief. We did a consultation in the summer of 2024, and that consultation wasn't appropriate. We did a different one in the summer of 2025, taking those points on board, and that consultation wasn't appropriate. We'll keep on trying. Hopefully we will get there at some point. What I would say is responses from town and parish councils that have paid absolutely no consideration for the request for information, and has been, in some regards, quite rude. So from that perspective, I think, you take two to tango, from that perspective. On the quality of the report, I've written the report. I apologise if people feel it's misleading or isn't consistent. I have seen the 115 and the 116k variant, which is because of a rounding error, because it's £115,600. Apologies for that. Hopefully that didn't confuse too much. Some of the numbers are the same. That's unfortunately the numbers are the numbers. I can't stop 66 being half of 132. It's just mathematics. But hopefully, if this does go forward to Cabinet, we will write a more clearer, transparent and more consistent report for Cabinet to take on board.
With your indulgence, if I may, very briefly, you were talking about the consultation or the survey. And it comes back to the point that I was making about actually next April, May, rather than you or officers producing another variation and hoping you'll get it right. That's not meant to be in any manner of, inappropriateness.
I don't think we'll ever get it right, to be fair, Councillor. I don't think we'd ever get it right.
Well, I don't know so much, because I think a collaborative approach between the borough as an entity and the towns and parish councils as entities could actually get the right survey, and that would actually allow the best result for everybody. And we want a consistent result for everybody. And that's why I'm proposing, and I'm happy to repeat it for the benefit of everybody, to defer it, the proposal until, for this year, for the coming year, 26, 27, introduce it in 27, 28, and that's it.
Councillor Allen, did you want to speak? Sorry, you had your hand up.
Sorry, we had William to finish up. Will you just bring my attention to that? Okay, right, hold on. So I've just had Councillor Greenfield raise hand, so I'll do that. I'm just going to ask all other councillors, if you do have a question, please raise it now, because otherwise I will come back to Sally and William to comment. Just as a point, although we are noting this report does have recommendations attached to it. So, you know, there is that as a point. So, Councillor Granfield.
Yeah, can I just respond in terms of writing surveys? Officers who do market research will know that the best way to get a good result to a survey is not to have the interested parties write the survey and have a neutral person write it with a view to establishing the information that is required.
Well, that's the £48,000 gone.
Just from a technical perspective, market research, if it's going to be done, needs to be done properly.
Right, so I think we're going down a rabbit hole there, but let's move on to Councillor Allen to wrap up. Oh, no, Councillor Adeleke, sorry.
Sorry, just a quick point. In addition to this survey that Councillor Doris obviously has said is not sufficient, has there been any attempt, or will you do any harm to have representatives of parish and town councils to have a dialogue with them in addition to the will there be any harm?
I'll let Councillor Allen answer that.
Well, it's interesting what you propose, Terry, because in effect, that is what this report is proposing, that concurrent services are not cut for another year. And in the year we have, before LGR starts kicking in, the financial services team will be liaising with parishes on an individual basis, seeing as the forms do not provide the information that is necessary to make decisions. They will have to do it on an individual basis, work with the parishes to find out what this money is spent on and what it should be spent on moving forward. So, in effect, that is in the report, unless I'm misunderstanding your point. And more than that, the process of looking at the concurrent services grant is, as it says in the report, is aimed at trying to identify what is the rump of services which fit into this equivalence zone. And Nigel's figures have given a range of where the savings may be, and the process will identify what the rump is that goes into the following years. Now, the benefit of potentially having contracts developed from this that lay out the delivery of a service paid for by the borough council, delivered by the parish councils on these areas of equivalence, is that, who knows, that might survive LGR, because that sounds like a very sensible delivery operation. And as I understand from Buckinghamshire, parish councils are being called upon by the unitary to do more than they have traditionally delivered. So that moving to that level of service means that some of what we currently pay for under concurrent services may survive LGR. Your proposal of knocking it down the road until the cliff face of LGR means that nothing will go through past LGR. On the assumption, fair to say, on the assumption that the successor authority is unlikely to want to carry on paying these monies, I won't use the G word, these monies because nowhere else in Hertfordshire has them.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to wrap up that item. Sorry, Councillor Stevens, sorry, Councillor Symington, we will allow you to wrap up.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on a few points that have already been made. So I think, Councillor Guest, you asked about corporate priorities. One of our key corporate priorities, number one, is consultation. We've already done 2 consultations on this. one in 2024, we did another one this year. We can only consult with people. It's a two-way thing. Communication works both ways. If we don't get anything back and we just get stonewalled, then that's, you know, that's on everybody to contribute to that. William Allen, Councillor Allen, went and offered to meet, and I think did actually meet with every single town and parish. Most. So certainly offered to me and had discussions with every single one of them. So to describe this as lazy, I think is to ignore the immense amount of time and effort that the portfolio holder has put into this and the efforts that have gone to work with town and parishes to get the responses we need to have a fair result. And this is ultimately about equity. This is about unwinding something. Councillor Doris, you talk about defending the indefensible. You sit here, this is indefensible. Even between the town and parish councils, there's no sense of equity, let alone between the parished areas and the unparished areas. This is an attempt to have a fair system across the whole of decorum. This isn't about just giving a grant, monies, funds, whatever, to favoured areas where they are not able to substantiate, or if they do, they are, and I'm sorry, I'm going to use Little Gadsden as an example. I really welcome you giving money to your local church, but why are the residents of Decorum having to fund that? That is a decision for the parish council. So it's about equity. This specific report is about warden grants. Funds that were designated originally for wardens. There are no warden services across Hemel Hempstead. The residents of Hemel do not have that service. In the towns and parishes, some of them don't have a warden and they're receiving a so-called funds for a warden, those services. Now, everybody rightly deserves to live in a beautiful and a well-kept place. But the town and parishes are getting funds for something that they're not spending it on. So this first step, the first step this year, is to address that issue around the wardens, where we can very clearly see that those funds are not given to the people in Decorum. They are only given to the towns and parishes. So that inequity has to be addressed, and that's what this aims to do. Now, another one of our key priorities, to come back to your question, our corporate priorities, is vibrant communities. Now, some of you represent areas of Hemel Hempstead which are not vibrant communities. I'm sure that you walk around the areas that you represent, and you can see those pavements are not looked after. Those communities are not, they don't get the services from Clean, Safe and Green. Clean, Safe and Green has suffered years and years of cuts. So those areas are neglected and not looked after. And we know that we have areas of high levels of deprivation in Hemel Hempstead which are not being looked after because we are subsidising parish councils to have beautiful, beautiful areas, to cut their grass more often, to cut grass that isn't even owned by Decorum Borough Council. So this, as I said, is an attempt to start to look fairly and realistically at what's been going on in this area. And yes, of course, it would have been so easy for us as the administration to kick it down the line. Well, we'll just leave it for LGR. Yes, politically, that would have been much, much easier. But actually, we aren't elected to do that. We are elected to represent, and I think somebody said this, best result for everybody. I think that was you, Councillor Duris. We want the best result for everybody, and everybody includes everybody across in Hemel Hempstead as well as across Decorum. So that is why we need to take this on. We need to look at it fairly. The first step, yes, it's a small step, but the reason it's a small step is because some of the parishes said, we employ a warden and this is going to cause a problem for us. So we've taken the step of making only a very small cut, a 50% cut in year one, and a second 50% cut in year two. We have deferred looking, exactly as you've asked, we have deferred looking at what are so-called concurrent services for another year to give those communities that found it difficult to engage the first time the opportunity to engage with us so that we know where we need to deliver those services. We know that we can help make sure that their playgrounds are well looked after and that the spaces that Decorum Borough Council owns are mown and well kept everywhere across the whole borough. So that is why it's important for us to move forward with this. It's important for us to accept that just because something has happened for a long time previously, that we don't just carry on doing it and kick the decision down the road for some other administration some other time. Just to come back to your suggestion, Councillor Duris, you are asking us to defer for 1 year a £66,000 cut across the parishes, but you're also denying those same parishes £200,000 up front, where they could invest in those things that they want to invest in. Why is that? I struggle to see why the town and parish councils would want to give up £200,000 capital investment that they can use for their communities to do something really good for them, to defer by 1 year a cut, which they know is inevitable and will help them manage their funding by 66,000, and actually enables us as an administration to invest in those areas in Hemel Hempstead that genuinely need that investment. And as I said, if you haven't walked around those areas in Hemel Hempstead, go and take a look in Grove Hill, go to bits of Gadebridge, go and see what it's actually like for the people that live there.
I go all the time. I work there, so we know.
Hold on, we're not having a discussion.
So I very strongly believe that we have done our absolute utmost in terms of consultation. You can always criticise it. It is easy to criticise if you don't get the result you like, that we didn't ask the right questions. We have gone out to all these towns and parishes on 2 occasions and in personal meetings. We have done everything we can. We have deferred the concurrent services. We are giving everybody the opportunity in the towns and parishes to come back and discuss with us, and we will be going out to them. Communication is 2-way. We'll be going out to them again to sort that out in the coming years. But we need to face up to the inequities and the inequalities, and we need to tackle them, and then we need to address them. And this is what this report does.
Thank you. So I'm just going to throw my quick comment as chair in before I wrap this up, and then we'll take a short break to allow people to go out. Whilst there have been a number of opinions given tonight about the report in front of us and the consultation, as it's called, going forward, and those opinions are all valid, I'm not taking anything away. I just want to say that that they're not necessarily shared by everybody. While I completely agree that the report has incomplete information on it, it is worth noting that a number of the town and parishes that were reached out to did provide useful information, did turn around and give the information to allow officers to tell us how that was being spent. So, please take other people's comments on board, but please don't feel that that all of us feel that the report or the questions were completely missing the mark. So thank you, Nigel, to you and all of your team for doing that. And with that, I'm going to have a short break because I know some people will want to leave before our next 2 items. You are, of course, welcome to stay, but I'm guessing, especially because some officers need to go home.
Do we need to vote on the report or not?
We need to note. So there are recommendations on there, but obviously we've recorded concerns with those recommendations that Cabinet is going forward. So yes, I think you're right that I do need to say, do we all note the report?
Agreed.
Okay. So it is currently 4 minutes past. Let's come back at 10 past. So we'll move on to our next agenda item, number 10, which is fees and charges. So we have the report, and Claire, I don't know if you want to say anything.
So just sort of as part of our budget setting process each year, we look at our fees and charges. The MTFS that was published in July assumed a 2% increase across the board, but we don't just take a 2% across the board. We look at benchmarking, we look at cost recovery, we look at supply and demand, things like that. So all of them things have been factored in as part of these proposals in terms of fees and charges that are put forward, and sort of where there's different fees and charges, we kind of try to put an explanation as to why we've kind of put that proposal forward. So it's just if anyone's got any questions on the proposal.
Okay, do we have any questions from the floor? Councillor Grenfield.
When I was going through the detail of it, kind of a couple of things sprang out. I have friends who have colitis, and I noticed that the cost for the radar key, the proposal is to increase that by 40% from £2.50 to £4. And that seems like it wouldn't be in line with one of our corporate policies on not discriminating against people with chronic illnesses or disabilities.
That is the cost of us providing that key, so we're not making any money on that. That is the cost of us actually purchasing and providing that key.
So the cost has gone up from £2.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Chairman. This refers to planning income. I see that it is in surplus. So is that because more planning applications are going in, or is that because of the level at which planning fees are set?
Combination of both. So we have seen an increased number of planning applications come in recently, which has led to sort of that surplus, and we're expecting that to move forward. Also, last year the government increased their fees, their set statutory fees, and that we've seen a benefit to us in terms of what our income is generated. So that's what we're using.
Thank you.
Councillor Capozzi.
Can you remind me, do licences, are they not down to our discretion to increase? Are they statutory ones? Yeah, okay. So there's no chance of them going up at all?
Set by government. Yeah, they've been set since 2005 and haven't changed, so we have no ability until the government changes.
Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, the leisure contract income increased by 175,000.
Yeah.
How has that come about? Is that good negotiating skills on your behalf? Or?
It's a variation in the contract in terms of the approach we're taking in terms of agency modelling and things. There was a previous report on it in terms of looking at the agency model approach and different VAT recovery options.
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
So under an agency model, local authorities can maintain and keep VAT. So that is.
That's it, yeah.
Okay.
Just as a note, there is an email of portfolio holder decision that came out probably last week or the week before that about it, that's got a bit of detail in.
Yeah, I think it came to Scrutiny in that quite a while ago.
Good bedtime reading for me.
I was catching up. Any further questions before I jump in with mine? So I'm just going to wrap this as a comment through to Cabinet. Whilst I'm okay with the cost recovery, if I say, going through, there are certain lines in the report that I would ask Cabinet to filter through some of our political objectives that we've had in for a mandate. So as an example, at the moment, if we look at the increases for CPZ passes, there is a look there to get a historic catch up on inflation, but it's blanket across all sides. Nigel's team very kindly modelled something for me that gives the exact same total cost recovery, but basically puts less than half of the burden on there for single car homes and puts the rest of the car up for homes that are having 2 or more vehicles. As a model on that, I would like some consideration to not simply take them on blanket increases, but to look at what politically we want to encourage our residents to consider. So I'm just going to note that as a comment. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not entirely comfortable with the revised process of setting the fees and charges before we set the budget. But clearly this is what we're doing, and we do that ahead of knowing what our financial support from the government might be. And clearly some of these charges are being set in order to balance the budget. They're not there because they've been necessary to charge more for the service, but as the report says, if we didn't increase the charge, you would have a bigger gap in the budget. I just wanted to if you know, I know it's unlikely, but if the government gave us an extra £1 million in the settlement in mid-December, are these charges again open to review as part of the budget heading process? Or is the cabinet meeting in December effectively setting them in stone for the following year? Where's the flexibility if we're financially better off? We're stinging people with increased charges just to balance the books when we don't necessarily know that that's needed.
I expect that's probably one for Councillor Allen to answer.
The increase in fees and charges, mostly it's the 3% for inflation. There are some areas where it's more than that. That is often areas where there hasn't been an increase for a number of years. And so it's accumulation of those 3%. In some other areas, it is an increase in charges, for example, where the current charge does not meet the cost of delivery. And therefore, like with the radar keys, but other examples would be green bin collection, where it is still subsidised. And so the increase is to get it nearer to the point where it is covering its costs. And so I'm not sure that any of these increases are linked to income generation. It is more about keeping our fees and charges in line with current inflationary pressure and catching up on some past lost inflationary increase, or trying to narrow the gap in terms of service delivery meeting costs. Within that context, I'm not sure that the fair funding settlement would have any relevance in the decision making.
Just to quantify on that, are you approaching a time frame that would mean that we get final approval or final council authorisation for these increases before we had confirmation on the full funding settlement? I think that's the key of Councillor Williams' question.
Yeah, I don't think we as an administration see them as being linked. The fees and charges are being looked at in terms of the pressures on fees and charges and costs, and the fair funding settlement is a completely separate, level of consideration in the council's financial management.
Okay. Any follow-up question? Councillor Capozzi.
Thank you. Under parking, does Decorum get any money from a parking ticket? Yes. And so under parking, does that include fees, as in penalty fees, or is it literally just the parking charges?
Penalty fee. So.
Yeah, but in terms of the reduction in usage hasn't been seen, and then there's going to be a projected surplus. Does that include extra money from parking tickets? Have you seen an increase in getting money from parking tickets?
Not that I've seen. So the modelling that I did and we looked at, it was supply and demand. And that demand hasn't seen the reduction that we were kind of anticipating with the changing habits, with the increased costs. So that demand hasn't been seen. There is potential for an increase in penalty notices, but I've not got the numbers on that.
That'd be interesting because I think certainly since the new contract, the visibility of parking on their mopeds around Berkhamsted is it's phenomenal now. They are actually a lot more visible. And one owner alone got you 3 tickets in a matter of 3 days in the middle of Berkhamsted this week.
So I'll take that away and I'll do some analysis.
Buy 3, get 1 free.
They actually opened up the ticket to make sure what the date was, and then when they realised there wasn't one for that day, he stood and wrote another ticket, and he had 3 on the front of his screen.
Okay, do we have any further questions or comments on fees and charges? No, in which case I will wrap that item up and we'll move on to agenda item 10, our final agenda item, which is our quarterly report. So thank you again to...
Just got a record, are you going to just note.
For a minute. With all these comments on consistency, I figure I will consistently forget to formally note that. So can we all please note the recommendations of changes to fees and charges?
Noted.
Thank you. Right, and then finally on to our quarterly reports. So thank you to the officers for being patient, and we'll come to Catherine.
Thank you. I will keep this brief. It's a 6-month performance summary for Corporate Commercial Directorate. It's quarter 4, 24, 25, quarter 5, quarter 1, 25, 26. And that's due to changes with publication dates of some of the performance data, but for the next 6-monthly report, we'll look to align it so we can get the preceding 2 quarters. It does cover a 6-month period though. There's more detail on the members portal, which has recently been launched. I won't go through the detail, I'll take it as read, but very happy to answer any questions anybody may have.
Any questions? Yes, Councillor Guest.
I've got 2 questions. The first one is on page 9, refers to debtors, time taken for debtors to pay. I see it's 61.57 days. It's mainly due to commercial rent and housing leaseholders requesting long-term repayment plans. If these excluded, the report states that the performance would be 31.5 days. Would that be the case that excluding those wouldn't give a true picture of the money which isn't coming into the core it should be, so that would mask the true performance? That's the first question. And the second one's on, go down the report here, and page 11. Again, that's referring to time taken for debtors to pay. But there appears to be a trend of it getting worse. So has any work been done to determine if that trend is statistically significant? And if it is statistically significant, then what is being done to address the issue of the time taken for debtors to pay?
Yes, so as I say, we do have a significant number of leaseholders. Their bills go all out at the same time. We are getting some large maintenance bills, bills that they get charged. As part of cost of living, we have to give them time to make them pay. They can't find. Some of them can be £5,000, £10,000. They can't find it. So we are having to give them longer to pay to ensure that the million is collectible rather than turning into a bad debt. So we do manage that, and we do monitor them payment plans to ensure that we're getting the best payment options as we can, but that they do change the figures. The 31 days was in there just to show that we are managing our debt portfolio. If you take them 2 cases where we've either got really large amounts of, money for a couple of people or long-term payment plans out of the situation, 31 days is really good performance in terms of getting them team to continuously making sure that money comes in as quickly as possible to ensure we get the cash in the bank, which is key for the organisation.
Follow up to that, is it the case that those couple of people in the long-term payment plans are outliers?
It's not a couple, there's quite a lot, that we have I can't remember how many leaseholders we have, but we have a lot of leaseholders. Bills are going up, costs are going up, so we're getting more and more going on payment plans.
Yeah, can I ask a question about that? The payment plans, are the people that you are encoding in that, are these people that have become maybe 2/3 of the way or 1/3 of the way through a payment plan and think, I can't afford to pay this anymore, can we rearrange it? Or is it people you initially agree with, but they're keeping up?
They're keeping up, yeah.
Payments?
Yeah, we keep up the payments, and if the payments start at endpoint slip, the team are in touch with them to find out why they're slipped and to get it back on track. So even if they get put on a payment plan, that it's still monitored that they're keeping up with it.
If someone has a leaseholder has a roof to be done, £10,000, they'll you'll say to them, look, we'll give you a loan over 5 years, and you pay that back. But is that included in those
Yes,
figures?
they're included in the figures.
So really, they are paying it back.
They are paying it back.
But
it obviously means that debt's taking long to pay back, so that's quite
and that's
skewed.
skewing your figures to 61 days.
Yeah.
Because as you say, your 31 days, that is pretty good.
Yeah.
It's actually excellent, you know, compared to a commercial organisation. So I'm not concerned about that at all.
And in terms of, say, trends, it's mixed trends. Depends on the debt type. Say the leaseholders, we are getting lots more requests for them to get paid in the longer term. More people requesting to go on payment plans. We are seeing that. The service are managing that, and as I say, we monitor it regularly. Whereas there's others that know we're getting that money in quick. So,
Chair, could I just pick up on the same subject here? Looking at leaseholders, do we split out tenant-type leaseholders against the ones where the tenancy is with a third party who, the landlord, in fact, is the one that we are chasing the money for?
when we make the payment plans, we take that all into account. So, you know, if it's someone that's got several properties, we know we have to know whether they rent out or not. That's part of their things. We do know who does rent out, who doesn't. And when we're making them arrangements, we take that into consideration.
Because it's not the tenant who's
it's
the leaseholder.
The leaseholder.
Who's liable.
Yeah. So, and we do take that into account. So, you know, we wouldn't necessarily be as favourable as we would for someone whose home it is.
Yeah.
Okay. But at the same time, their costs might have gone up and their margins. So, you know, it's all part of the negotiations.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Juris.
Just an observation, actually, with my audit chair hat on page IR01 brackets Q. I'm a wee bit concerned to see that we're slipping to 90% to ensure all recommendations are reviewed and closed by the internal auditors. And I do know, and I'm happy to report that the internal auditors are highly impressed with the work of the Cornwall Borough Council. So I'm disappointed just to see that slight slippage, especially coming after Q3 of the previous year when it was only 69%. It's something I'll probably mention at audit, and Rick, you'll no doubt be there. Just want to make sure we hit the 100% all the time. And the other observation I have is that in terms of the telephone answering response, 420 seconds to answer a call, which is 7 minutes. And that just feels in the current sort of, if you like, customer focused climate, that's a long time to answer a call.
Aren't you in a position to respond to that? Aidan's looking at me.
So you'll remember, Councillor Dewlis and other members, that actually performance has a couple of years ago was significantly worse than that level. So the fact that we set the target at that level and we benchmarked it against not only our sector but other sectors, and we are consistently within that. The next step for SAG is to then look at that and see if actually we can squeeze that target even further. And it is that balance between efficiency and effectiveness, and also as we try to encourage people to use other means rather than using the telephone, making it incredibly easy for people and to use the telephone probably may not have the impact on their behaviour that we might want it to. So there's a sweet spot in amongst all of that, but that's a piece of work that Saj and his team are going to be taking on.
I think that stretch that you're talking about is good to hear.
Okay. Any further questions?
One more. It might be page 10 about the commercial development performance summary. What about the new garage business plan? We seem to have had a garage business plan for a long time. So what's this new garage business plan? Where are we with it? What's happening? And what's going on, really?
Kenny should have been with
this
yesterday.
last night. Sorry? You should have been.
It was in Spain yesterday.
Right, okay.
Just to answer,
Recorded.
so the last garage business plan spanned 2 years, and so there's a new one now starting from 26 onwards.
Right.
So that went to Spain last night
Right.
and was presented.
It was very well received, Spain.
Excellent.
Yeah,
That was,
I'll read it then.
yeah, and that looks to generate additional income over the course of the next 3 years. It's got some, so it's mentioned here as well because the commercial team works closely to support the development of that with the neighbourhood operations team. So yes, it's an interesting read, Councillor.
I'll have a read.
Councillor Grenfell.
I note on page 11 that we're forecasting a pressure of 0.46 million due to increased repairs, which seems to be a lot of damp and mould. And you might remember that I raised this at my first finance meeting based on resident casework. And it seems the process for resolving damp is about 4 years. We have kind of 3 steps that we know might work, probably don't. And then in year 4, expensive, the one that we know fixes it. Is that pressure because we've got more getting towards the more expensive repairs, or has the overall cost gone up?
I'd have to look into it and take it away, but we have seen costs go up. We've seen, you know, materials alone, you know, are significantly increasing, so.
I would be interested to see
fine,
that,
yeah.
so I'll talk to you separately about it. Just the 6 cases I've got have all got to year 4 with the fix that we know fixes it. So if there's more residents in that position, then that will be part of it as well.
I would just add there that there's been if we're talking about the damp and mould and replace that, there's been a tremendous amount of work and accelerated programme looking at, to resolve where there are cases. So that has more costs, but was felt to be so important. So yeah, it's the right thing to be done.
And a comment from me, I've noticed there's some strange descriptions of the KPIs on here. I think they're all correct. They're just, some of them read a little bit funny. We have budget versus forecast outturn. We have forecast versus budget, or we have outturn versus budget. I think I understand what they all are, but being that we are now halfway through a year and a forecast and a budget, I was just going to give that as a nudge in case anybody else had any confusion following it. So it might just be worth seeing if we've called the things what we want them to, and if we've got a consistent approach to the KPIs. That is the end of that report. We move on to the next one, which I've now lost place, so I've got the title, but I'm pretty sure this is an Aidan one.
Yeah, it's an Aidan one, although that's not its official title. So yeah, this is similar report as per Catherine's area, representing 6 months worth of performance. I'm going to assume that you've had a chance to look at it. The areas that this committee has been most interested in the past around things like sickness, call handling, which we've talked about in complaints. The improvements that we've made in those areas over the last 2 years have broadly been maintained in the most recent reporting period. A little bit of fluctuation, but from my point of view, nothing particularly to worry about. And I think I'll probably leave it there, and very happy to take any questions.
Councillor Guest.
Thank you. This is referring to call handling, page 17, because it's saying that you said about how things have improved. I've had an anecdotal report from a resident who was hanging on for a long time, and when she eventually got to call number 1, she was cut off. So, have you had any other reports of that? And if so, what is being done to address this issue?
Yeah, so I mean, we do ask for feedback for our callers. Sometimes there are technical issues with the system that may mean that people have not
cut off. People do have the opportunity to email as well. In terms of just people getting through, there are different routes that people come through depending on the subject matter that they want to discuss. And we focus a lot on that, what we call the IVR, making sure people can get through to the right route in the right way as easy as possible. So we've recently done some more work on it. We've got more work planned on it as we start to introduce more self-service capabilities, allows people to, for example, call and then get text links so they can quickly sign up to things so they don't have to wait. So yes, it is on our radar. In terms of individuals, if they do get cut off, we do encourage them to feed back to us because sometimes it's a system issue and we don't have any, or our call advisors don't have any direct control over, but we can then feed that back to the call operator, the system provider, to make sure that they're on top of it.
And just to jump in, I don't know if you've got any numbers, Saj, but the feedback that we get from callers is very, very high. It's very, very positive.
Yes, so we really recently introduced a new way of requesting feedback from callers, and actually the results are they're very good and very satisfactory. And that's one of the things that we want to focus on is actually satisfactory calls as opposed to call wait times, because actually what we want is a happy caller at the end of the day. Regardless of how long they've waited, we want a successful outcome. So that's one of the things that we're focused on, just trying to get feedback on that.
Any further questions? Councillor Grenfield.
On page 18, on positive performance and achievements, there's mention of a mentoring scheme being introduced to help with staff development. As part of the mentoring scheme that Ford used to operate, they had a day where they asked business leaders and other local representatives to come in to share leadership experiences. And I wondered if you'd considered that as part of development for the council staff to get a wider perspective of what's going on in the borough.
So we're definitely looking at kind of external insights to come in. That's definitely part of the programme. I'll remind the team and check in with the team as to how that's going in exactly, what the programme looks like. Very happy to share that if you're interested.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So with that, we will close that agenda item and close the meeting. We haven't quite got it under 2 hours, but thanks everybody for thank you. Wish you all a good night.
Thank you. I want to thank the chair who's not feeling